La la la. Ta-da. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Have I Told You the One About? And today on today's show, we have yet another special guest, or as I like to call them, imaginary friends. Would you like to meet our imaginary friend today? This one's very exciting. You know why? Because so far it's all been women, and I got a man who's an imaginary friend. You were thinking I was just. Anyways, I also have male friends. Let's introduce him. On the count of three, count with me. 1, 2, 3, poof! It's
Hello.
Dave! Hi, Dave.
Hi, Michael.
Welcome to my
So good to be in
show.
the show. So glad to have myself on.
You got all dressed up. I love your little bow tie. I always shake
Oh,
your
the
hand.
bow
I forgot
tie.
to shake your hand. Hey,
My
hi.
mic.
Well, the bow tie's on this end.
Oh, okay. I get it now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so Dave, here is the magic story portal. I gave you the secret code. Can you send me your story, which is creeping out of
Okay.
the bag? I'll just slide it back in. Okay, ready to receive.
Okay, 1 second. Sent.
Wow! That came with electricity. You are going to tell us about the young pilot. That sounds like a
Yes.
that sounds like a goodie, Dave.
Well, it's a time that definitely stood out in my memory banks because I was learning still, and it was part of a really bizarre process in aviation here, where at least at that time, the most difficult, dangerous jobs went to the people who knew the least. And
The
so,
most
a couple
difficult
of years into
job,
my career,
the most difficult
sorry,
job was given to the people who knew the least.
basically, yeah, because there were nobody really wanted to be working up north, flying in the bush,
Oh,
and it was by far, at least in the late '90s, it was the most dangerous work you could be doing in general aviation. So it was a learning curve, put it that way.
wow. So up north means where?
At that time, I was working out of a town called Sioux Lookout, Ontario, and that was my home base. And then I would fly to all of the fly-in reserves in Ontario from Manitoba all the way to James Bay.
Okay, wow. So cool.
Mhm.
It sounds exciting, even though it's dangerous.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, when the weather was nice and the summer days came along, it was a really pleasant time as well, and I made some good friends as well there. But it was definitely the year of how do you put it? The year of growth,
Mm.
professionally and as an adult as well.
Okay, well, tell us this story.
Well, just a bit of background. This was kind of at the time when GPS was just starting to be a thing in aviation. So we had very simple equipment in our little twin engine airplanes that we used to fly. And I flew for a small charter company. And we flew alone. So it was a single pilot operation when each of us got our airplane assigned to us for that day, or a charter assigned to us for the day, we were on our own. And up there's no air traffic controllers. There's nobody talking to you when you go from one place to another.
Okay,
Uh,
wow.
you're, yeah,
So
you're
how do
flying
you
typically to gravel runways that are all, they all kind of look the same. Um, the reserves each have a little airport built adjacent to them or somewhere near the town. And most of the work that we were doing, or by far the biggest part of it, was all kind of bad news work. It was moving crisis teams, doctors, and nurses, and people with medical issues in and out of the communities.
wow.
And yeah, so it definitely had a weight to it because you were needed. You felt like you were needed all the time.
Yeah, and you're bringing these people to really terrible situations.
Yeah, in some cases it was good. I mean, people would leave the community and get their shopping done, or meet up with family members or return to their families, and that was always nice as well.
Okay.
And you always had a time, especially because some of the flights were long enough that you could actually talk to people. Because usually a passenger would sit in the co-pilot seat, and you'd have a chance to pick their brain about what it was like to live in these places.
Wow.
And I had no idea. I mean, this was for me, it was forgotten Canada. I had no concept of what life on flying reserves was like.
Right.
And I needed to find out more about the history. That was kind of it's a different story, but as I learned more about the history of how the reserves were set up, everything acquired even a greater weight. And I started to understand a little bit about the problems that were present in each community.
Right.
So, because of the type of airplanes we flew, we were able to fly in all kinds of bad weather, often at night. And yeah, we did it alone. And the nighttime bad weather flights were by far the most dangerous. It was there were not a lot of navigational assistance from nav aids on the ground, or we had to use a lot of very basic skills to get us close to the ground. And when we did, we were maneuvering close to the ground at night in the blackness. And it was pretty common in that sector of aviation to know people who had been killed in all kinds of accidents in that time. And in fact, in the 2 years following my job there, 3 aircraft were lost at my company. Two in accidents that were not fatal, and a third one that killed 6 people.
Oh, man.
So we kind of ended up becoming very fatalistic about the work.
Right.
And it wasn't good for the state of mind after about a year. So everybody did their year contract and understood by the end of it that we were kind of rolling the dice on our lives.
Yeah.
After too much
Oh,
time
that's
up there.
so hard.
Yeah. So I was 24 at the time, 25.
And you were a new pilot.
And, I had a couple of years of experience already flying on the West Coast.
Okay.
But it didn't quite translate exactly into that kind of an environment. There was a lot of different kinds of challenges. I'd never really seen what a Northern Ontario winter is like. And,
right.
in the summertime, I didn't have any concept of how big thunderstorms could be in Northern Ontario as well. So that was another thing that, the other types of hazards that we had to learn.
Right, because you didn't grow up in Ontario, you grew up in BC.
That's right.
Yeah, it's true. I remember the first time there was a big thunderstorm in Vancouver when I moved there. Everybody was freaked out because we just never got storms like that. And I was like, oh, we get storms like this in Ontario all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're up close to them, they're like living things.
Yeah,
and,
you're in it.
You're in. Trying to navigate around them.
Yeah.
You're basically like dancing with this giant that's stomping all over you.
That's a great metaphor.
That's what it feels like.
Okay.
Well,
we
don't have the ability to fly very high or very far around this weather.
And what kind of planes are you in? Like, how many people can seat in those planes?
We flew small 6 to 9 seat twin-engine aircraft.
Okay.
So one day, this was about towards the end of the winter, the first winter I was there. I was given maybe about 3 months into my job, I was by default assigned the role of chief pilot, which kind of was funny at the time for me, because it wasn't because I was, the most qualified. It was because I was the only guy who could do it.
Jesus.
There was some requirements about how long you needed to be in the job, and the last chief pilot left, and I was just given the job. So I was in charge of 4 or 5 other pilots and the operation and the safety of my pilots.
At 24.
So, yeah. So it was a big responsibility. And after a little while, I was just trying to absorb all of the lessons I was experiencing on a day in and day out basis. But I also kind of felt like I needed to lead from the front. So I made sure that I did all of the worst trips, the ones in the worst weather, the longest trips. And I felt like, well, I'm supposed to be the more experienced one, so I better do the difficult work so that I have a little bit of credibility job. So that's what I did. On this one particular day, I remember it was a long evening trip. I had to bring a search team from Sioux Lookout to a town called Pikangikum, a reserve in northwest Ontario. And there was a guy, a hunter lost on a trap line for some amount of time. He was overdue, and the people in the community were worried about him. So his community had arranged for a bunch of dudes, really fit native dudes, to jump in the airplane with a bunch of gear and get dropped off in Pikangikum, and hoping that they could get in and go retrace his steps and find him.
Wow.
And it became pretty clear at that time was sort of the essence. It was still really cold out. I think it was late February. And they really needed to get out there and try to find this guy.
Right.
So we piled into the airplane, and we went it was about an hour and 20-minute flight, I think, from Sioux Lookout. And the weather wasn't very good in a lot of the communities around there. There was a lot of low-lying cloud and fog. And it was already dark by the time we were halfway there. So twilight was sort of settling on everything. And in the wintertime up there, of course, you have a couple different problems. You have I was completely full of people, so the airplane doesn't perform well when it's really heavy, icing and clouds. So as you're flying along, the airplane will accumulate ice. You look out at the wings, and there's ice slowly building up on the wings, and you have equipment that can get rid of it, but it doesn't work great. So this is kind of in the back of my mind as I'm continuing the flight. Also, the weather, I know the weather is not great at the destination, and I might not be able to make it in. And this is causing me some trouble because when I'm talking to some of the guys on the airplane, I know that they're playing it cool, but I know this guy that they're looking for has been out there for a while, and they're eager to find him because he might not survive that long in the winter. I can't remember how long it was overdue. So we got to the destination airport, Pikangikum Airport, and there was this kind of convoluted procedure that we had to do to descend to an altitude where we could hopefully see the airport. And it involved kind of flying a hockey stick pattern in the air so that you could pass over the airport, turn around in one direction, double back, and hopefully align yourself with a bit of the runway. And if you could see the runway, you had to circle to land. And all of this had to be done at night while looking at the left side of the airplane in the murky darkness.
And so you're looking for, because it's nighttime, you're looking for lights on the ground. A certain
when we break out.
A certain pattern of lights.
Yeah.
Right.
It's basically two little strings of lights on the ground. And this is after flying a kind of a challenging instrument procedure where you're just zeroed in on the instruments of the airplane and navigation instruments that you have. So one of the things I had, which a couple of the other airplanes didn't have, was a type of altimeter that told me the height above the ground instead of the height above sea level. So it's very accurate. And it just sends a little radio signal down to the ground and bounces back up and tells you how high you are above the ground.
Okay.
And so on my first attempt to find the airport, I descended to the officially lowest limit that I could descend to, because every approach has a limit that you can descend to be safe from terrain, and it's not technically legal to descend below that altitude because it's not safe.
Right.
So I did the first approach. I didn't see anything when I broke out, when I hit that minimum altitude, and I added power and I went around. And it's already stressful because I'm concentrating to get to that point. And then I have to do another approach and I have to make a bunch of radio calls and tell people who may or may not be flying around that I'm trying this thing.
And your
and
planes...
as it turned out, there was another airplane trying to do the same thing, and so that guy was waiting for me to either land or go away.
And your plane's full of people who are talking and...
Yeah, and they don't understand,
And you don't want to tell them, you don't want to say, hey, it's life or death, shut up now.
Exactly. Well, they already told me that it was life or death. So I had to try it again. And the chance of doing something wrong and making a mistake go up quite a lot when you have to do an approach a couple of times, especially when you're by yourself.
Right.
So I was already stressed out from the first attempt and feeling pressure to do this. So I did the second approach, and I figured, well, I've got this fancy little radio altimeter. I can descend a little bit lower, and at least I know how high I am on the ground.
Yeah.
So I did the second approach, and I descended a little bit lower than I should have, and didn't see anything. And again, I think I saw the tops of trees skimming by the bottom of the airplane, and that got my attention. But I didn't see anything when I reached where the airport should have been. So I pulled up and I went around for another try.
Oh, no.
So on the third try, I'm emotionally and physically and mentally exhausted from the effort of doing this. And I'm really determined to try to get this search party in. And I do the third approach, and I'm as precise as I can possibly be, and I descend a little bit lower to much below, or appreciably below, the minimum altitude I should have been at.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking that I'm still safe because I've got this device that tells me the exact height above the ground. However, just as I was approaching where the airport should have been, it was like I had a co-pilot talk to me. Like I heard a voice in my head that wasn't mine, and this voice said, "This is all good, but your radio altimeter might tell you how high you are above the ground, but it's not going to tell you if there's an obstacle in the way. And at this particular airport, there's a telephone communication tower that's 200 feet tall, and it's right at the airport, and you're going to hit it." And I don't know where that voice came from, but it was clear as day, and it wasn't my voice. It was like a third man.
Oh, I got
they call it.
Goosebumps. They call it the third man?
Well, I remember reading about something much later on that there's this kind of phenomenon that shows up with people in really dire circumstances where they have a disembodied voice speak to them. And it's some sort of, the voice of conscience or the voice of instinct or something that gets your attention.
Mm.
It's maybe some sort of psychological phenomenon. So they call it the third man syndrome. I don't know why third man, but that's just what I've heard it referred to as. So just as I was approaching the airport, this voice had advised me that this is not such a good idea. And I remember the clarity of that voice. And it was like a wise old guy voice. And I got goosebumps. I was like, there's something out there I'm gonna hit the airplane with. Like I knew that it was gonna happen as soon as that voice finished speaking. So I pulled up and I went around, and I remember passing directly over the airport. I could see the graded airport apron area where the airplanes parked, or just a little patch of dirt near a simple little terminal. And as I was climbing into the mist, I remember seeing the little beacon on the tower pass by the left wing, at the altitude that I would have been at.
Oh, man.
And continued to the point where I wanted to, that would have just shredded the airplane, and everybody would have been lost. And so I called it a day at that point. I went to an alternate airport. I think it was another place not too far away. Maybe it was Poplar Hill or another reserve. And I dropped the guys up there. And presumably maybe they got some sort of land transportation. I don't know what would have been available, maybe ski-boos or four-wheelers to get to the place that we were supposed to get to. But that was the best I could do. And nobody knew, how close that everybody could come to dying.
Right.
They got out. They said nothing.
Oh, man.
Nobody complained about anything. They just said, okay, get it.
That's wild.
And the guy who was waiting to land at the airport I was supposed to fly into never made it in either. He made a couple of tries and then went away as well, back to Suluk, I think.
Wow.
But it made for a really long night. I remember thinking on that voice the entire flight back home and shaking the whole time.
Wow. That's amazing. And do you know whether they ever found that guy who was in the woods?
They did.
They did, yeah, and he was alive.
Yeah, I got word of following week that they found him on the trap line. I think he was injured, but he was fine.
Oh, I'm so relieved. Yeah. I want to cry. I'm so relieved. Wow, yeah. Dave, that's a fabulous story.
Yeah, so it was kind of the first real example of trying to pay attention to the voice in your head when you're against kind of a wall of exhaustion and you don't have much left, and if the stakes are high, there's usually some little reservoir of wisdom somewhere in you that's trying to speak to you.
Right.
And I guess that's what it was.
Yeah, that's amazing. Have you heard that voice again? Will you come back and tell us another story when that voice materialized?
Yeah, I've heard that voice again. It was never in that kind of circumstance. I mean, I because of my inexperience up there and the type of work that we did, we took bigger chances than we should have.
Right.
And I thankfully I work for an airline now, so it's very easy to make go or no go decisions based on limits.
Right.
And I have another person next to me that's keeping me honest too. So.
And another set of eyes and.
As in a co-pilot.
Yeah. Well, Dave, that is an excellent story. That was the young pilot. Dave, can you sit there and smile? Because I always get out of the frame and I let people take selfies, and they can send selfies with our storytellers. So here's me going away. You just look handsome. Handsomer. Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah, that's right. There, you can send your stories, your own stories of near-death experiences, or you send a selfie with Dave to me. You can send that, look, here. You can find an email contact on my website at michaelvsmith.com. You can like this page, thanks to the people who already liked it. You're my favorites. The non-likers, well, you have to get behind the favorites. Don't forget, you can subscribe to my channel. You can share any of these videos you want. Dave's probably going to share this with all his people, because it's like having a visit, right? You don't just get a visit with me. Now you get a visit with Dave, too. Don't you want him at your dinner party? You can also click the notification bell if it'll tell you when we go live. And that's just the magic of Have I Told You the One About? Dave, we're going to give them a big kiss, and I'm going to show them my sign as we exit, because sometimes technology is being difficult, and then I'm going to talk to you in a minute. Okay?
Sounds good.
Here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming to my show. Thank you, Dave, you amazing pilot. Thanks for saving all those lives.